All right, it's week 0, whatever that means, of the college football preview. It's part 2 here for the 2021 season. Randy's back with me. We're doing the late night shift on this Friday night. We're not normally this late, but we got kids and they got lives and they play soccer and other sports, so things got to happen. But so welcome, Randy, from across town. The wetness it is Dayton. How's your weekend shaping up for you?
Hot.
That's a good word.
Yeah.
Looks like we won't get a reproof from that till Monday. So,
Right.
hey, I was just gonna say last week we had some people come on and say hey. So let's give a shout out to Bruce Porter. He's saying hello. Hey, Bruce, thanks for watching in. We're not used to having people chiming in on the show, but that's what we want. So don't feel free to ask us questions related to football, and we'll do our best to give you the answers. We're not point spread people, so I do apologize for that. But if we get enough people wanting point spread, maybe we'll just flip a coin and get some point spread numbers. But so yeah, this is week 0. I don't know where they come up with that. Next week is week 1, but at week 0, we got about 5 games, I think, and one of them's pretty interesting from a standpoint of it's Nebraska and Illinois. I was hearing some things about this game. I looked it up. You know, it's interesting. Last year, Illinois and Nebraska played. They're both in the Big Ten. They're both on the same side. Illinois, Lovie Smith was their coach. They won 2 games last year. One of them was Nebraska. They beat them like 41-25. And they were so good to beat them, but yet they fired their coach last year. That's how good they were. But they beat Nebraska pretty bad. So now we got Illinois with a new coach, Brett Bielema, for those who remember, a guy that defected from Wisconsin and went to SEC and didn't do anything except give Arkansas fans false hope. So, you know, Nebraska, they got Illinois, and they got a tough road to hoe because this is Scott Frost's 4th year, and I got it up here on the page. They play Buffalo, won the MAC last year, Oklahoma at Norman, they go to Michigan State, come back for Northwestern and Michigan, go to Minnesota, come back for Purdue, Ohio State, go to Wisconsin, and end with Iowa. He needs to win this game because if he don't, I don't see a whole lot of wins on there. And I started looking back at Scott Frost's coaching. He's only at UCF for 2 years. The first year wasn't very good. The second year, he went 13-0, and they crowned themselves self-national champions. Maybe Nebraska gobbled him up a little bit too quickly because they thought he was a hot commodity. He's a Nebraska guy. He played there. But he has not won more than 3 games each of the years in Big Ten. In the Big Ten, that is, in 5 games overall. He did 5 once, but 3 in the Big Ten each year. So I'm thinking he might be a big hot seat that not a lot of people talk about, with the exception of now they got all these accusations of analysts. You know, if you're an analyst, you're not allowed to tell a guy, use your left foot, or whatever, So they got some weird NCAA infractions and stuff. So I just think Scott Frost is on a hot seat. Do you agree?
Yeah, I definitely think that he is. I don't think they got what they thought they were going to get. UCF had the one, and they had the really good season and the self-proclaimed national championship and all that. And I think Nebraska obviously thought that they were getting something special there, and I think everybody's seeing that it wasn't so special after all. But yeah, he's definitely on the hot seat. I can't see them doing really well this year either, to be honest with you.
Yeah, reminds me of another thing. They finished 5th in the Big Ten every year. That he's been there all 3 years. This is year 4, so they're not progressing as a team. Adrian Martinez has been the only quarterback he's had since he's been there. He's gotten actually worse each year as far as numbers go. I know last year was kind of an anomaly. They did play 7 games, I think, last year, so they got a little bit more than some people in the Big Ten, that is, especially the Pac-12. But yeah, they're tough road to hoe, and if they don't improve, there's another thing I heard is that the best players in high school football in Nebraska, they're not signing with Nebraska. So he's not even winning his home best players. And, Nebraska's a tough place to try to go pull people out of California and Texas and Florida to come to Nebraska. That's a tough place to say, hey, why don't you come here and freeze for 8 months out of the year or whatever. So he needs to see some big time improvement. Maybe, he really needs to have, in my opinion, he's got to have a 500 season or better. to keep his job. I know people say, well, who else are you going to hire? I hate it when they say that because I'll use Ohio State as a game for example because I know more about them than anybody. Nobody knew who Jim Tressel was when they hired him. And he won a national championship in his second year, went to 2 others, and had winning seasons the whole time. So there's guys out there. People say, who you going to hire? You going to hire? You don't always have to hire Urban Meyer and the other big names. There's guys out there that are coaching really good football. There's no doubt. So, yeah, he's in a hot seat. So I think we definitely both agree with that.
Well, you have these offensive coordinators these days that are just, I mean, they're really incredible. Really, they're some of the best minds in the game there, and of course, I mean, the offense is way ahead of defense. Right now we talked about that a little bit last week. With the rules alone favor the offense, and like I said, these guys are coming in and finding ways to spread things out and get the matchups that they want, and I mean that's what's come along probably the furthest that we've seen in the last. We could say several years, but most definitely in the last 2 years. And talking about, are we ever going? Are we going to see a shutdown defense again? Because I think the days of a 10-7 game or a 14-10 game, I think those days are few and far between right now.
Yeah, I don't disagree. It used to be three yards in a cloud of dust. Big Ten football was power football, Alabama, LSU, back in the late BCS days, 9-3 field goal festival. Nobody crosses the 40. I mean, it's just grind them out, beat you up. And then, all of a sudden these offenses just start coming out of nowhere in these schemes. And the defenses are still catching up, but they're working against the rules. There's no doubt, and they want the scoring, and I see that because scoring moves the needle. There's no doubt. If the TV ratings can't argue with the numbers, but I do like defense. I still appreciate a good defense. So, and with the big boys, those defenses look really good when they're going up against teams that aren't as good as they are. They don't have the 5 and 4 stars. They're just going to gobble up, and their defense looks like they're, You look at teams like Clemson and Alabama have met so many times in the last 5-6 years in the playoff. Their defenses look so incredible getting into the playoffs, but when they play each other, sometimes it's a barn burner on offense because now you're playing teams that have players just like you. You're not playing lesser players where you're just mopping them up. So it's just I agree. It's one of those cyclical things. I wonder if the defenses will ever get back to that, and I don't see how it really can happen from the rule standpoint. They keep, making the rules to keep the offensive players, don't touch and all that stuff, So yeah, that's scoring fest. It's the Big 12. They were pretty proactive in that about the last 10 years.
Yeah.
They hadn't played defense in a decade, and look what that is.
Right. Well, going back to the defense thing, I think you're also seeing, the big recruiting schools are making a really big deal to get that marquee defensive back and the pass rush. So I'm thinking that, the defensive coordinators out there are thinking, that, hey, we got to be able, how are we going to be able to keep up with this, with these offenses that are just so explosive? And, well, we got to get that 5-star defensive back and that 5-star defensive end to, put pressure on that quarterback to try to slow things down. So, I've noticed a lot that, on the articles and stuff you see when one of the big team, Ohio State, Alabama, Oklahoma, whoever, if they get a 5-star defensive back, man, that is just a major deal to them.
Yeah, I know when Urban Meyer was still at Ohio State, one of his big deals every year was he's still trying to get a 5-star interior guy. He was loading up on the outside, Joey Bosa, Nick Bosa, Chase Young, now it's Zach Harrison. But he could never get a 5-star interior guy like some of the other big schools are doing, and it kind of showed a little bit because Ohio State's defense was just never quite as good as other top-tier defenses were, shutting down the inside, and it's tough, because and now with name, image, and likeness, and I think I saw an article yesterday. 5 Ohio State football players all got cars from a dealer. They got the picture taken oh, I got these beautiful rides. I'm like,
Oh yeah.
yeah, and I think possibility there could be. Like, it would make sense that in some manner or fashion in the locker room, there's going to be jealousy when guys get stuff that other guys don't. You never know, but it just kind of makes sense a little bit. So I think that I don't know on whose team to win, but you see that potentially happening. But teams like BYU, I like what they did. We mentioned that last week, where all their walk-ons got their tuition paid for by local businesses. So at least they feel like they're getting something. So another game I was looking at was Hawaii's going to UCLA, and I wanted to talk about this because I think Chip Kelly, he may not be quite on the hot seat, but he hasn't really done anything to put a stamp that he's at UCLA now. He was so great at Oregon, and he did some decent stuff in the NFL, but then he left and came back to UCLA, to the Pac-12, I should say. And he's not quite elevated that team yet. And they have Hawaii. They're probably going to beat them, although Hawaii's got some decent players, but I don't know. I've heard it, UCLA's recruited a little bit better. The interesting thing is, the next week they're hosting LSU. And if they get killed in that game, that's just going to tell a lot of people where UCLA's at. They're nowhere near the SEC. They can play with LSU and lose, but lose respectively. Then maybe he shows that they're moving in the right direction and going somewhere. So that's going to be, and LSU looks to be a lot better this year. Last year, I think they were 5-5 last year or something. So I think that's going to be an interesting Week 1 matchup amongst all the other. There's so many great games in Week 1, and that's, in my opinion, is going to be one of them that's interesting to watch just because of who the teams are and where they're going to be. Ed Orgeron, I don't think he's on a hot seat. He won the national championship, then it was COVID. I think he's fine. If he springs together a couple bad seasons from now, maybe, who knows, but they love him down there, so I think he's good for a while at least. He's a Bayou boy.
Well, a lot of people think that Ed Oregon is, on the hot seat after, of course 2019 they had a great year, and one of those offenses that we were talking about, just unstoppable. And then last year they were 5-5. So, this year, and I've even seen them projected to win the SEC in some polls. I'm not sure that they're going to make that kind of leap, but they definitely should be better. Lost everybody. They started a lot of 4- and 5-star freshmen last year. And they're still one of the top 5 or 6 recruiting teams in the nation.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
But they still need to do well this year because those guys, those schools are brutal whenever they're not doing what they expect them to,
Yeah, high expectations, no doubt. And like you said, that LSU's always got, it's kind of like a Notre Dame. They always got great players. They recruit well. So, like the year 2019, they had the great players and then the star power, Joe Burrow, and then also Joe Brady, the coordinator, one of those great offensive minds. That whole thing, they just came together like peanut butter and jelly, and they just went through the SEC. Mm-hmm. They didn't destroy everybody, but they were wonderful to watch. It was a beautiful thing. I love seeing an Ohio boy play quarterback. Small town, it's your storybook stuff, and it was great. It was a great year for them. Hats off to them. I would love to see Ohio State play them, not because I think they would win. I just wanted to see Ohio State go up against another Ohio kid. Big deal, but it was really good to watch. It really was, and all those guys, a ton of them went pro. They're all one of them's in Cincinnati, and stuff. Jamar Chase and all. So. Yeah, last year COVID, they lost a ton of people. It's a COVID year. Nobody can practice. Nobody got fall camp. Last year's kind of a wash. So LSU will be interesting this year. The whole SEC West is really going to be interesting. On paper, I guess, you give a little edge. Paper, which means about what it's worth written on, Texas A&M because of people coming back. But it's on the field. Everybody knows Alabama reloads. They got absolute 4s and 5s. Coordinators. They got to get it all together. They got to get the chemistry. And if they don't have that, they might have some issues. When I say issues, I'm not talking about losing the season or anything. But I think that's their first. I don't say their first big game, but that's the game that Jimbo Fisher kind of brought out as the game everybody's got on the calendar because he says we're going to win that game, you know. So, and I think that's in A&M because I think it was at Tuscaloosa last year. So, you know, me personally, I don't think Alabama will have any trouble with Miami, and that's who they play week 1, especially with their, you know, De'Aaron King is supposed to be the main deal in Miami. He's coming off ACL. It's like 8 months ago. That's real quick to come back from an ACL injury. So I'm afraid he may not be 100%, which is sad to rush him back. You know?
Right. You know, the most dangerous thing he does, in my opinion, I mean, he can throw the football. There's, no doubt about that. But the most dangerous thing he can do, and the thing that Alabama has had problems with in the past, is a quarterback that can run, and he can run. He can run really well. But like you're saying, I mean, long as he's, if he's healthy, a lot of people are talking, possible Heisman guy. And, so, I mean, that game is a time for him to shine. And honestly, I mean, if he played lights out, most incredible game, Johnny Manziel kind of game, then he's going to make a big statement.
Yeah, I don't disagree. There's no doubt. If that game was in Miami, I might be a little more apt to say they got a somewhat better of a chance. Neutral field. It's Mercedes-Benz Dome in Atlanta. The Alabama's played there. They're very familiar with that place. It's going to be a mixed crowd. It's not going to be a favorite crowd for a home thing. And it's going to be interesting. Alabama starting a whole bunch of new guys with a whole bunch of new coaches. Not like they've never done that before. So Saban, has the ship going in the right direction. And, I know one thing. Miami's defense was not, the whole turnover chain and all that, whatever. They're not lights out and so if anything, Alabama could come out and run the football and then just, work passing into it. Who knows? But I would definitely put money on Alabama in that game. There's no doubt. If I had $1,000 and I had to do it, I would pick them for sure because I just don't see it. I haven't seen enough of Miami in the last couple of years to really think that they have moved up that far. In the SEC.
Yeah,
So.
well, then they have a pretty easy game, but then they come right back with Florida. So I mean, the first part of their season is really pretty tough. They have Florida and Ole Miss in there, Texas A&M. I mean, it's going to be that's just going to be a real interesting division. If you look at, like you were saying earlier, guys that are coming back, the teams that have the most guys coming back,
right.
In the SEC, it's Texas A&M and Georgia.
Yeah, there are a lot of people talking about Georgia, and it gets me thinking more about them because, I don't know what they would have looked like last year if they would have started JT Daniels earlier, but he's getting a nod this year, and it's his team, so to speak. And look out, but then again, a lot of people are like, Georgia tends to underperform, except that 1 year they went all the way and they had the lead at halftime and coughed it up to Alabama. But yeah, Alabama, I got their schedule right here for this year. It's, because it comes up. They had Miami, then they played, I think it's Mercer or whatever MER is. Then Florida, then I don't know who USM is. It's not Southern Miss. But yeah, they play Ole Miss, then A&M, then Mississippi State, then Tennessee, LSU, New Mexico State, I think, and then Arkansas, then Auburn. So I don't know what to make of Florida this year. They lost a lot of guys. Didn't play in that bowl game, and it looked like it. So we'll just see if another start named Maury Jones, and he was supposed to go to Ohio State, but then when Justin Fields came out of State, he decommitted. I thought he was on the Georgia roster for 1 year, but maybe he wasn't. He went straight to Florida. I'm not sure. So it'd be interesting to see what I think he's got the nod there, if I'm not mistaken. So if that's the case, it would be interesting to see how he performs compared to how Trask was. And it's not going to have the weapons Trask had. But, being an SEC school, I'm sure Dan Mullen's got guys in there to keep his offense going the way they want. So that'll be interesting. Florida is a mystery to me. It'll be really interesting to see how good they are in their first game, no doubt.
Yeah, well, and next week it'll be pretty fun because we get to start making some picks on some really good games. Georgia, Clemson. That's probably got to be the biggest game out
Yeah,
there right then. I mean, there's some other good games, but that's got to be the most interesting with implications of teams that are probably going to end up in the top five.
yeah, they were talking about that. I heard, if you look at that game, if Clemson loses to Georgia, it really doesn't hurt them a whole lot because it's not an ACC game, and everybody figures Clemson's going to walk through the ACC. If Georgia loses to Clemson, they're down one, and they're playing in the SEC, even though it's not an SEC game. Not only do and the losses don't count, but they'll count nationally when you get down to the CFP poll. So it's a more hurtful game to Georgia than it would be to Clemson, just because Clemson's got what looks like to be an easier road to get to their conference championship than Georgia will. And that's pretty much the same for anybody on either side of the SEC. The SEC's two sides are always a tougher road to hoe than the other three conferences, the last 4 or 5 years. It's just the way it's been, no matter who they are. There's not two really good teams in any one side. Now, Penn State and Ohio State battled out a couple times. It was fun to watch, but technically Penn State only won one game against Ohio State, and it was on a last-second blocked field goal that went to the end zone. Still, great football, good games, but they couldn't overcome the hump. And even in that game when they had Saquon Barkley and they were up by a mile and still lost Ohio State, I loved it. I don't know how Ohio State came back in that game, but I loved every minute of it. As a Ohio State fan, we were cheering at the bar now.
Well, going back to that game, if on the other side of that, if Georgia goes in there and beats Clemson, in a close game or even in a blowout, and then Georgia comes back and loses to Florida and loses to Alabama, that's not going to help Clemson at all.
Oh yeah. Now, granted, if Clemson loses and they get embarrassed, then that's going to say, okay, what's wrong with Clemson? Because that way, and if they go around, if Georgia goes and doesn't play very well against better SEC teams, that will throw a red flag up on, okay, is Clemson even good this year? So I don't disagree with that. That quarterback for them, E.J. Ugaluglige, whatever his name is, he got some decent time last year in some decent games. He played against Notre Dame. He played against Boston College. So he's got some time under his belt. So, it's not, you almost figure he's not going to be Trevor Lawrence. Not that I'm saying Trevor Lawrence is the second coming of John Elway or anything, but he was a heck of a recruit. He came in rookie, freshman year, a couple games into the season, and they put him in as a starter, and he went on to win the national championship. Granted, it's a team game. NTM was great. They had great receivers and they had a killer defense, so it was a whole thing going on. So we'll see. But no, that's absolutely a good point. Georgia steamrolls, and you know what? I'm not saying it can't happen. I don't know how good Georgia can be this year. I might be. I think you and I. Who were we underwhelmed? Was it Georgia last year that we kept underwhelming? Not picking them, and they kept winning. There was somebody last year. You and I we weren't high on them. They just kept winning. I just can't remember who that is, but that might be Georgia this year. I don't know what to expect from them. But if they shoot out of the gate and beat the pants off of Clemson, look out. Maybe they got something going on. And Kirby Smart finally got a team together.
Yeah, but see, being so early, it's going. Like I said, it's going to come down to what they do after that.
Yeah.
Florida, they got Alabama, so the implications for both of those teams really depends on what happens later. If Georgia looks great against them, then lays an egg in the other one, that's going to hurt both of those teams.
Yeah, absolutely.
Of course, we don't know what the heck. We don't know what's going to happen. I love looking at these things that everybody's making a pick, and of course their team's going to win it all. I've seen it. I've seen everything. USC's going to win it all. Oklahoma's going to win it all.
Yeah.
It's
you turn me on to that Facebook group, man. It's worth a good couple laughs every day looking at.
That's that frenzy thing.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
I'm just, I finally found two people that were in a thread that talk a lot like you and I, where they're calling it for real. And I even told them, I said, hey, man, good points. I'm glad there's other people out there that are saying the truth instead of just homering the heck out of everything, it's just funny. I can't even think off the top of my head, but yeah, LSU the Joe Burrow team is the greatest single team that's ever played college football ever. It's like, okay, come on, whatever, But even worse than that is the predictions for this year, and it's just funny, the homerism I call it, what they do to all the all the links of my, I mean, I am honestly. Do I think Ohio State's going to win the Big Ten this year? It's favorable by a large margin. That doesn't mean it's going to happen. I mean, Ohio State could come out. C.H. Stroud could puke before every game and throw 5 pick sixes. Penn State could finally come over. Anything could happen. Jim Harbaugh could have a sleeper team up there that's going to start mowing people down. Stranger things have happened. But if I feel like Ohio State's still the team to beat. So in the Big Ten, nationally, different story. No doubt about it. So that's a crazy group.
Yeah, we talked about that last week. It's not that we're not talking about the other divisions. I think some of those divisions are kind of set, in my personal opinion. We talked last week. Ohio State continues to separate itself more and more from the field in the Big Ten.
Recruiting, absolutely.
Yeah, I would love to see Michigan be the Michigan that we knew, when we were younger and some years back, and in Penn State, Nebraska, that would be great. The kind of stuff that we're seeing in the SEC, to see that in the Big Ten, and then in the ACC, Miami, Florida State. I mean, those teams were once, very solid teams. I mean, so you can't knock Clemson or Ohio State for the conference that they're in. I mean, it is what it is, because at one point those conferences were very strong. We're just seeing right now. We're just seeing 2 teams, being Clemson and Ohio State, that in my opinion are separating themselves more and more. They're doing it with coaching and the coaches that they're bringing in. They're doing it in recruiting.
Big time.
Big time. So I mean, I don't know what these other guys are going to do to be able to keep up with them.
Yeah, if I had to pick a team that is doing the best job at trying to get close to Clemson in the ACC, I would definitely say it's North Carolina. And that's a tough deal. That's a basketball school. But Mack Brown is a proven commodity. He's got them playing well. It's still a long way to go, because it took Dabo a while to get that team up to where he's got it. He didn't do it in 3 years or anything, but he did it, and it's coaches and recruiting, and developing. They're developing players. Guys coming in are better when they leave, That's another big deal. You see that in Alabama. You see it at Ohio State. You see it at Clemson. You see it in Georgia. You see it in the big schools. Guys are better leaving when they were coming in, which is testament to the coaches. There's no doubt.
Yeah, and let's remember last year that the North Carolina Clemson game come down to a 2-point conversion that North Carolina decided to go for and missed it. That was a 1-point game.
Yeah. Exactly.
So I mean, they could have sent that game into
overtime.
Overtime. But they went for the win, and so. Yeah, I mean, that's if they do that again, then certainly they've closed the gap that we were talking about. For now, and mostly because, I mean, they do have a great quarterback and they got a good running back, but are they going to be able to keep up in every other aspect of the game?
Right. Yeah. Because it's if your defense isn't halfway decent, they were not very good on defense last year, so they scored a lot of points, but they got a lot of points scored on them. So if you can't make some stops, then it's just a matter of who has the ball last sometimes. But like you said, that was one heck of a game. I remember watching and seeing the score on the bottom of the screen that North Carolina is holding serve with Clemson. I'm like, hey, I flipped over because everybody, you see somebody like that's not one of your teams on the ropes. You want to see him go down.
Oh yeah, that's a great game, and then we could go back to the Big Ten, being the other team that we were talking about, being Ohio State, separating itself. I see, Penn State is ranked pretty high right now, but, most of their recruits are 3- and 4-star recruits.
Yeah, and no fives.
Yeah, and I don't think that they're going to be able to hold that spot.
Nah.
You know.
Now it's super early, and the main reason they got that spot is because Ohio State's quarterback for next year showed up on campus and quit high school, so they moved him out of that class.
Right.
He was the absolute number one overall recruit. You know, whatever that means. You know, it's worth a cup of coffee until he plays in football. You know, and then they had a decommit, so all of a sudden Penn State's up number one. OU just lost a guy on a decommitment of Oklahoma. So yeah, Penn State's up there, and you're right. I was looking at that; they got 0 5-stars. I'm thinking, okay, so it's just only a matter of time before teams like Alabama and Clemson and Georgia start signing guys before they jump.
Right.
You know.
Well,
so,
and it's getting, and we talked a little bit about it last week. It's going to get really crazy with this. With the NIL going on, and it's going to be about money, and guys are going to be looking at, okay, what schools have been at the top here, which school sends the most guys to the NFL. Heck, I mean, some of these guys are going to go into the draft, they're already going to have billions of dollars.
Yeah, exactly. Part of it was like, man, if they can make great money NIL, then maybe they'll just go to the school they want to go to. Not necessarily the school's going to make the most money, but if the market, if it's where the school is that's doing NIL, then all of a sudden it matters where you go. And then, so that could favor USC. They're in Los Angeles, for crying out loud. Mm-hmm. A ton of money out there, surfboards and bikinis and everything else. So why not go to play school there? So that could really help them in a lot of Pac-12 schools if that's how it rolls. But who knows how it's going to play out? When I heard that Trey Lance guy was the second overall pick and he went to a Division II school, I thought, wow, there's a new thing. Go to Division II, never get hit, throw 70 touchdowns, and then go to the NFL, be the number 2 pick.
Yeah, that's gonna be interesting how that works out. That's the fact that we have a guy that's skipping his senior year of high school to go to college football for the main fact of money.
Yeah. Well, Bruce Porter says it's sad, really.
That's all there is to it. I mean, I hate to think of a guy missing out on his senior year of high school.
For that reason, absolutely. I mean, there's injuries and COVID and all that, but flat out choosing to skip it because you want to take the money. That's a rough one, especially when you're figuring to be a guy that's going to make a lot of money. Like I said, I think we said last week, I don't know who his parents are, but where are they at? That just sounds like somewhere where you got to step in and say, hey, I don't think it's a good choice, but
well, they keep creating these monsters. We don't have to like it. We don't have to like, a guy skipping his senior year. We don't have to like the guys that set out the bowl games because they're going to make a bunch of money in the NFL. But, on the other hand, I'm sure we can both agree and say, hey, we're talking a lot of money here. So, do you blame the guy for doing that? I don't like to see it, but I don't blame him.
No, I don't disagree. We both said last week, Trask should have never played in that game. So many guys opted out. It's not going to be a game you're going to be competitive in. And then he killed himself in the draft. I think we both agreed on that. His draft stock went down because he looked horrible in that game. He threw a pick 6. It was awful,
Yeah.
So, the bowl games are going to get hurt. I think expansion was on its way. Then OU and Texas made their announcement. There's the SEC. I think that's going to stop expansion because I think what everybody's probably going to assume is if the Big 12 even stays together, they're not going to be considered a Power 5 anymore. We're going to get down to the Power 4. And with Power 4 and 4 picks, there's no reason to expand. Notre Dame's got to look better than the conference champions, so to speak, or Cincinnati. I mean, I love UC. I love Luke Fickell, but they had a great year a couple years ago, and then they went to a bowl game, and they didn't look that good. So it's like, it's not 5-star guys, So to say, 9-0, they look great. Yeah, but they're not as good as the elite. Now if you want to try to make it 8 teams, and you get your Power 4 conference winners, and you get some group of 5 guys in there just to give them a shot, but I mean, how many football games do you want to play in a year? I mean, it's almost getting to be too much with this trying to go to 12. They're already playing 10, 11 games. Now all of a sudden you want to add 3 or 4 more games on the schedule. And the bowl games, does anybody watch any of the bowl games except for the 4, the Final 4, the top 3 games. So it used to not be that way, but times are changing, there's no doubt. So,
well, they're talking, we're hearing talk of an alliance between, the Big Ten, the ACC, and the Big 12, which, I mean, with the way things are going, I could see that happening. But then you have the Pac-12 sitting out there saying, we're not looking to expand, we're not looking to do anything. Well, you're already being left out of pretty much everything the last few years,
right.
as far as the playoffs and all that. And honestly, I don't think they've had a team that would be competitive with the other 6 or 8 teams that are ranked ahead of them. So I mean, they're going to have to do something eventually also.
It's just strange because, in this day and age, you're not given a whole lot of time as a head coach to do something. And the first year of the CFP, Oregon was in the national championship game to Ohio State beat. And they had Marcus Mariota, Heisman Trophy winner. They had a decent team. They were totally on speed. I mean, they had the team they had when Chip Kelly left, basically. And now that coach that took over Chip Kelly, he's gone, and they got a new guy. It's a whole different looking team. It's like Turnover City, they're totally not the team they were anymore. To keep that going, and then USC has they keep pointing the needle at USC. USC and Oregon, I think they're the 2 big brands because Oregon, especially because of Nike, and USC just because of who they are. I think if UCLA was ever to get bigger again, they could be a good brand because they are Los Angeles. But so much turnover in coaching, Sarkisian went from Washington to USC, and then he had to leave there because of the alcohol thing and all that. They've had a lot of trouble out there keeping stability in the coaching ranks to where they can get any kind of momentum going, and then here comes the SEC and Ohio State and Clemson, and they are just picking out the top guys out west and bringing them out east. So it's a recruiting war, and once the other teams all over really see that for what it is and start recruiting better, if they don't, they're just going to find themselves watching other people play for the CFP. That's just the way it's
Yeah,
be,
and of course the Pac-12. I mean, they have a chance to make a statement early with UCLA and LSU and Oregon and Ohio State. I don't think it's going to go well, but we don't know that for sure, and that would certainly help the Pac-12. But on the other hand, if what happens, what I think is going to happen, then the Pac-12 is going to just take another black eye.
Yeah, as we already know, LSU or OU and Texas are still in the Big 12, so the Big 12 will still be represented for a few more years. There's some talk about buyouts for next year and having OU and Texas go early, and I don't know if that's possible or not. I've never seen the contract, so
I've heard that.
Yeah, it would be. It's like, okay, go ahead and get it over with on one hand, but it's really going to affect things because you can just pretty much draw a line through the Big 12 champion for the CFP if OU and Texas aren't in that league anymore.
Yeah, I mean, let's my opinion is let's get it done. Let's open up the playoffs and let's get with it.
Oh yeah, now if they open it up, that would be. I think they could look to open it up simultaneously. If they're gonna, when they expansion, let's go ahead. The 2 teams move. Let's go ahead and expand to at least maybe 6 or 8. I think 8's a really good number personally. 12, I think is just a little bit too much right now. 8's really good because I think there's probably 6 good teams that can really, they don't recruit it well, but they could, make it really interesting. 12, it's just going to be like a mini college basketball tournament. The lower teams out of the 12 are just going to get absolutely boat raced. It's like, why even have those games? So, but that's that's years down the road. But maybe next year for OU and Texas, who knows? I don't know if they'll do the playoff that quickly, but all they got to do is vote and do it. So it'll be, and Well, and here's another thing, and this is why I think they're going to expand. I think they said the first year of the playoff, it was like 30 million was their number, and then each year it's gone down. And this past year, which is Alabama and Ohio State, and it was like 18 million. So they're wondering, well, yeah, I think it's great football no matter who's in it, but I guess there's a lot of people that are sick of seeing Alabama and Ohio State. So they think if you expand it, that's going to open it up for more. It will open it up for more teams to get in it, but I don't mean those teams are going to make it to the final game. They might, but most likely the cream usually rises to the top. They got to start recruiting. It starts with recruiting, there's no doubt. So
Yeah, I still think when this year when it's said and done and the committee's making their picks, I still think it's going to be between the same 6 teams. It's going to be Georgia. It's going to be Alabama. It's going to be Ohio State. It's going to be Clemson. Possibly Texas, Oklahoma. Yeah, I think Oklahoma's going to be in there. I think Oklahoma and Georgia probably have the biggest expectations, not just from their the team or their fan base, but from the country. Actually, is everybody's pushing Oklahoma and Georgia,
and they're the ones returning star quarterback power from last year. Everybody else of the top tier teams are all putting new quarterbacks in the mix. So whatever that's worth, and honestly, I think that's worth much early. You get into mid-October football, they're not freshmen anymore. They've played enough games, and then it's from there. It's on for the rest of October, November. It's a race to the end, and everybody is pretty much seasoned by that time, barring injury. So it'd be really interesting. Spencer Rattler, Heisman talk. He put up some big numbers last year. Lincoln Riley's offenses have always put up numbers since he's been there, and they feel like they got a much better defense this year. But basing that a little bit on that Florida game, and there's not a lot of guys played in that game that should have. So I don't know how good their defense will be. So we'll just see when they play the better teams what their defense looks like. So. But it'll be interesting. But I don't disagree on paper from last year moving in Georgia and Oklahoma are probably my 1 and 2, and I would probably have Georgia 1 just because they're an SEC school and they play better teams on a more regular basis. Just because that's the way.
Yeah, and one of the things about these big name quarterbacks that are out there, and we've seen a little bit of change in the NFL with the smaller guys playing, Kyler Murray and Lamar Jackson.
Yeah.
Tremendous speed by both of those guys. But anyways, we go back to college, and it's not the typical pro-type quarterback that we've seen the last, several years. Those guys are all, you look at Bryce Young. He's listed at 6 foot, and they say that's really pushing it.
Yeah, exactly.
Spencer Rattler, he's listed at 6'1". A lot of those guys are smaller, smaller guys than what we've seen in an NFL. The 6'4", 6'5", 6'6" guys. Yeah, I was looking yesterday at that, and I'm thinking, a lot of these guys are smaller guys, and I'm not saying that they can't be great players and win the Heisman and go to a great NFL career. I'm not saying that at all. But from what we've seen over the last several years, the bigger guys, probably doing a little bit better, being more of a prototype passer, that kind of thing, seeing over the line, all the things that we hear that they talk about. Yeah, the 2 guys that kind of stood out to me was the Georgia quarterback. He's a big guy. He's like 6'3", and then the guy from Clemson is a big guy, 6'4", 6'5", something like that.
Yeah,
but I was looking at all the other 4 or 5 guys, and I was like, man, they're all hanging right, about 6 foot. And I'm just wondering, how's that going to work out? I don't think it's going to have much effect, in maybe not in college football, but moving forward, it could have a big effect.
Yeah, especially with the NFL, with the exception of maybe Arizona, I don't know how it's worked out for him much, other than Kyler Murray is just so hard to tackle because he's so fast. So many college teams are running that read option and that what is it? The read option and then the run pass option, where you got to cover so many people. It just gives the quarterback big lanes to run through in college, and they're not there in the pros traditionally. So like a guy like a Justin Fields that has taken off a few times, and Trevor Lawrence took off a few times, he's got some big runs. It's not going to be there in the pros. They're going to get popped up because the game's faster. Everybody in the pros can run fast. It's not like so. They got to be able to throw. And I think those two guys are probably two of the more accurate passers I've seen in a while. Come out of college football, dropping deep dimes, putting things right in the numbers. So and I think Mac Jones was much the same when he took over Tua. I watched him in this next game after that game, and I was just like, that guy can throw the football. I mean, he's putting it right where it needs to be. So I think I think he'll have a longer career because he's not back there running his butt off. Look for it. If it's not there, throw it away. Live to play another down. Don't try to score on every play. That type of mentality. But yeah, I don't even know. I haven't even looked at the size of the Ohio State quarterback. I have no idea how big they are compared to Justin Fields was. He was a nice tall guy. I don't know about the ones this year. Of course, Haskins was tall too. But so I'll have to see. But yeah, I thought. Like Josh Allen, I remember watching him at Wyoming, and I was like, that guy's going to be a heck of a pro. He's probably going to be like Ben Roethlisberger. Nobody's going to know who he is. He's going to go on there and light it up, and he's doing a pretty good job.
Yeah.
In the pros, the guy's huge. He's got a monster arm, and if he takes a hit, it doesn't really hurt him much because he's so muscular and big, and you still need that in the NFL, there's no doubt. But like I said, in college, they getting these athletes that can just run like nuts, just makes it so much harder on the defense because now you got another guy you got to count for that can take it to the house,
Well, I think, long term, I think they're going to find out they need to let the running backs do the running because, you're going to have a 6'4", 6'5", 310-pound lineman that that can run as fast as some of the fastest running backs that we've seen in the past. And then you have the linebackers and defensive backs that are faster than that. So it's going to be hard for these guys to run away from anybody, and we're starting to see that like we were talking about earlier in college football. The guys we're going after that 5-star defensive end, and he's the prototype NFL type guy, and the shutdown defensive back. That's what everybody's looking for. You're probably not going to outrun those guys.
Yeah, and case in point with Justin Fields the last 2 years going in college football. 2 years ago they make it to play Clemson and they get beat, but he was already banged up from running around too much all season. He had a kind of a bum knee, and then last year he got dinged by Skalski. Of course, it was a flag, and Skalski got thrown out of the game. But that hurt him, I'm not saying to change the outcome of the national championship or anything. I'm just saying, if you let the running backs run and you just kind of be more of a passer, then you're not the one out there getting killed. It's the 250-pound fullback killing that guy. So, they do. I agree. I love the passing game, but I'm still 3 yards in a cloud of dust. I love a good running game. I love a good defense, and the art of that is really lost in football these days. They're just not quite. It's like Derrick Henry? When Ohio State played Alabama and they beat Alabama in the Sugar Bowl, and they were running. Was it T.J. Yeldon? Was there?
T.J. Yeldon.
Yeah, Derrick Henry was better than him. If they would have ran a lot more Derrick Henry in that game, I wonder if Ohio State would have won. I really believe it. I'm boss talking about it a lot. He was a beast. He didn't get many carries in that game, and we were happy about it. He was a monster.
Yeah, well, I mean, Elliott was awful good. He ran downhill, and obviously he had a big game there. So,
honestly, obviously that's a game. Just like when games Alabama wins, the games Ohio State wins, you tend to watch a lot. Cardale Jones did a lot of running in that game, and he was hard to bring down. Big 6'5", 250-pound quarterback that can, he ran over a lot of guys because that's probably something that Alabama hadn't seen all year. A big guy to run like that, and of course he's only starting his third game, or second game. Sorry, it was Nebraska or Wisconsin first year. So that played a pretty big role. But there's no doubt the defense was decent. Elliott was just, if he had done that earlier in the year, he might have been a Heisman candidate. But he peaked so late in that year, the Heisman was already spoken for him. But he was lights out.
Yeah.
Lights out, there's no doubt. But Derrick Henry, I think, as close as that game ended up being, he might have been a game changer in that game. He was a beast. I'm so glad they didn't give the ball to him.
Well, going back to the first part of that conversation, maybe you can answer this. Why do Ohio State fans always automatically go back to 2014?
Oh, that's beating Alabama. Absolutely. I'm sure Auburn fans go to the kick six.
I know.
Yeah, it's yeah. I mean, make no mistake. I can. It's one of those things where you remember exactly where you were and what you were doing, and how sick to my stomach I was in the first half because it just looked like Alabama was just going to roll them. And then it just didn't happen. That was before I think Saban made the transition. Blake Sims, he wasn't a 5-star quarterback, and now they started getting better guys in there. But like I said, me and my boss both agreed. It was the same thing happened a few years before that, or no, after that, when Penn State had Saquon Barkley and they weren't playing him. Oh, I just lost you for some reason. Oh, I don't know. Hopefully he'll come back and get him back in here. Just lost Randy for some reason, but I was going to say Saquon Barkley was behind somebody, and they weren't playing him very much. But a couple of times they played him, he was obviously the better running back. And we were kind of talking, me and my boss saying, I wonder why they're not running him because he was way better. Here comes Randy. Okay, we got you back in.
Yeah, I don't know what happened there, man. Got shut it. See, look at that. You started talking about 2014, then you cut me off.
Well, I was mentioning, like, Penn State did the same thing. They had Saquon Barkley behind somebody his freshman year when they played Ohio State. And a couple times they gave him the ball. It was so obvious he was way better than the starter, and they should have ran him. They probably would have beat Ohio State that game. It was not the 2017, it was before, probably 2015. But, Derrick Henry is way better than TJ Yeldon. That's just the way it was. But, there's no doubt. That's our bell cow. And you know what, though? The Clemson game is just as equally important because we never beat Clemson in the history of Ohio State Clemson. And we finally beat them, and we beat them real good. And Fields looked phenomenal. That 60-yard touchdown pass to Olave and the numbers. So I love watching that. So that's my new go-to game. That's replaced the 2014 game of Alabama is last year's Clemson game. So don't watch last year's Ohio State Alabama game much. I don't know.
So so that Clemson game helped you kind of get over that 31-0 thing, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, the year before we played really good, and I think we had them, but then I don't say the penalty, but the one penalty on Sean Wade, that is what it is. But I really think that was a fumble on a scoop and score. I can't believe they turned that thing around, but whatever. But anyway, we got the redemption last year, so we redeemed ourselves. It'd be nice, to put it all together. That's one thing great about college football is, it's a couple of years, people move on, you get new people in. It's just a secular thing, so it's tough to stay on top. But when, me and my good friend of mine have always talked about how we're very fortunate to live in the times that we've lived in. We've seen the greatest basketball player, Michael Jordan, some of the greatest football players, Joe Montana, Jerry Rice, Steve Young, whomever, Troy Aikman, Smith, blah, blah, blah. College football is the same way. I mean, look, what Nick Saban is doing in Alabama is absolutely, probably, other than a really long time ago, and I went back and looked at a lot of records. Newt Rockne never did what Nick Saban's doing. He's a legendary coach.
Right.
He's putting together 12 or 13 straight years of 10 wins or more. And he's doing it in the hardest conference in football is another thing, So, relish it, man. These are times that at some point in time, Nick Saban's going to step down. Who knows what the next guy's going to do? Who knows who the next school is going to be when they finally are not on top? And, and how long will they have to, do that? Urban Meyer's a great coach, but he just never sticks around long enough to create a super legacy, That's just his deal.
Right.
No big deal. That's what the way he wants to do, So I wish he was still at Ohio State because, he did a fantastic job. It's just the way it is, So, but yeah, it's a lot of great things happening. And then hopefully they don't kill the sport and make it all about the money, and then it's
all right.
You lose
Yeah,
the stuff.
that's my fear from what we're seeing right now. Uh,
Bruce Porter
we're
wants to be on this show. I don't know which one. He said, "I'm not biting on that one, Randy." I don't know what he's talking about.
which one is he not biting on?
I'm guessing it's the 2014 when we were talking about that. The
Yeah,
Alabama. Do you know him? Do you know who he's a fan of, or?
oh, he's a big Ohio State fan, just like you.
Ah, okay, so it's might have been that. Yeah, here he goes. He says yes. Go Bucks, Bruce. Go Bucks.
Yeah, that's yeah. Okay.
But no, yeah, it's a great time. I love college football, and I just don't want them to kill the sport. So, and I don't want it to be the same 5 teams. I'm glad my team's one of them. But yeah, we got to get Michigan. We got to get Penn State. We got to get a few others, and each, the USC's, UCLA's, Oregon back up, even Arizona, and ACC, like you said, Miami, even Boston College, Florida State. These schools got to get up and get it going, and we got that, and that's all. If all those teams are playing for it, so to speak, not every year, but just in general, that's great football, and that's got to make more money than just about anything else you can imagine in college
Yeah.
and stuff like that.
Yeah,
it should
but
be good for everybody.
this year you're going to see the same for. I mean, the 5th and 6th might jump into that 4, but it's still going to be the same 5 or 6 teams vying for those 4 spots. We're not going to see much different. I don't think so, unless we see something really surprising or shocking.
Yeah, if Oregon, let's say Oregon shocks the world and beats Ohio State, then Ohio State runs the table, wins the Big Ten. Oregon runs the table, wins the Pac-12. They may look that much better than OU, and they might take that 4th spot. Pretty much we're talking, ACC, Clemson, Big Ten, Ohio State, and the Big Pac or Big 12, Oklahoma. Those 3 teams, and then any one of 5 teams could win the SEC maybe. So that's going to be the biggest question mark is who's going to come out on top in the SEC. Yeah, anybody can say Alabama's going to be a heavy favorite, and why shouldn't they say that? They've won it so many times. They're dominant, so can somebody knock them off? This might be a good year to do it. Who knows? I mean, it's I can't predict it. There's just too many variables, too many unseens. Georgia's looking good. Who knows? I mean, it's going to be really fun to watch. There's no doubt. I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be fun to watch.
Well, the good news is we're 1 week away.
Absolutely.
And, after that, each show that we have going there forward, we have that many more answers and many more things to talk about. So.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. So 1 hour is in the books. This is part 2 of the preview. But when we meet next week, Ohio State and Minnesota will have already played. So pretty much we can say we got Ohio State in that game, right?
Absolutely.
Thought so. So that game will be over by the time we go on the air next Friday. I think we get out of September, we'll probably move the show back on to Saturday mornings at its normal spot at 9. So, but for the time being in September, we'll be on Friday nights, usually at 7. Tonight's a little variable because of a switch in scheduling with a soccer party for the girls' soccer team, pizza party. So, we'll see you next week at 7 o'clock. We'll be talking week 1. We'll give you some big-time predictions because that's right before tons of great games. Tons of great football to look at. Lots of answered questions going to be coming on in that week. Great games, and so I'm looking forward to next week's for sure. It might be a 2-hour show. Probably not, but you never know.
Yeah. Looking forward to it. It'll be fun.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Bruce, we thank you big time. He says good show. Thank you, Bruce. We appreciate it. We look forward to doing next week's. Thank you for chiming in. Give us some questions if you have any. But I'm glad you're not biting on that one, like you said there. So, nice to have a Buckeye fan in the crowd. So, so we will be back next week. So until then, everybody have a good weekend. Randy, you have a good weekend, and we will close out with so we'll just take it easy. So, anything you want to say?
It's going to be hot, and I'm going to be hanging out at the pool.
At the pool. I know where to find you. All right.
There you go.
Okay,
you don't have to look. You don't have to look far.
All right. So until next Friday at 7 o'clock, we'll see you guys next week. Thanks for tuning in. Real quick, give me a like on us. Give us a like on Facebook. And if it's YouTube, click the bell, click the subscribe, and let us know what you think. Appreciate it. And we will see you guys next